August 22nd, 1992. This is not good at all, FBI agent Alex Newman thought to himself as he surveyed the mountainous terrain around him. Newman was a member of the FBI's Hostage Rescue Team, or HRT, pronounced HURT. He had been with the Bureau for 18 years, and he had never seen anything like what was happening now. More than 300 law enforcement officers from both federal and state agencies had swarmed onto the area since Marshal Deegan had been killed the previous morning. These agents that surrounded the Weaver residence wore camouflage clothing and face paint and were armed with machine guns and sniper rifles. Along with hundreds of armed police agents was an impressive array of vehicles and other equipment. There was a huge command post set up at a neighbor's property, complete with satellite links, communication trailers, motorhomes, and wall tents. There were 14 Humvees, 2 armored personnel carriers, 3 2.5-ton cargo trucks, 2 medevac helicopters, 1 used surveillance helicopter, 2 Army field kitchens, 6 water trailers, and 4 field generators. The aerial photos that the agents were using had been taken by an Air Force F-4 Phantom pilot. I don't want to be a part of this, Newman told himself for perhaps the 10th time. No way they're going to get out alive now. All wood cabin up on the hill. Sun ought to be out before long. Everything will be dry in a few days. This many agents. The man felt an overwhelming sense of dread about what was to come. I don't want to be here when they burn this guy and his family alive. The HRT man was thinking of the 1974 raid in California, when he had only been with the Bureau for 3 months. There, the Bureau's final assault on the so-called Symbionese Liberation Army had resulted in the fiery deaths of 5 people. He was also thinking of 1983, when tax protester Gordon Call of the Pose Comitatus had been burned to death by the Bureau. Newman was remembering the courses the FBI gave its agents on the use of fire to burn out adversaries. Maybe I can get a lateral transfer to Cheyenne, Wyoming. Take a few cuts and benefits if I have to. I'm getting too old to watch this kind of shit anymore. As it turned out, although Alex Newman was right in his prediction of disaster for the family on the hill, his fears of fire that morning were premature. Randy, Vicky, their 3 daughters, and Ken Harris were indeed surrounded by hundreds of agents. Up on the mountain they had some freedom of movement, however, and were not completely trapped in the cabin. The FBI did not elect to burn them out. Alex Newman would have to wait another 6 months before the Bureau would once again demonstrate its expertise with incendiaries. Special Agent Lon Haruchi of the FBI's Hostage Rescue Team in Quantico, Virginia, was settled in behind the scope of his bolt-action .308 caliber police sniper rifle. The gun rested on sandbags and was aimed at Randy Weaver's cabin, about 200 yards away. It was close to 6 o'clock in the morning. Horiuchi and the other FBI snipers had been watching the Weaver cabin for several hours, waiting for a target to present itself. He had already been given a clearance to shoot. Randy Weaver sat at the kitchen table. He was thinking of his son, whose body lay in a shed outside. He heard one of his 2 remaining dogs barking, and instinctively thought of Stryker, Sammy's yellow lab, who was also dead. Sounds like he's behind one of the sheds, Kevin Harris said to his friend. Probably smells Sammy, Randy Weaver said forlornly. He stood up and took a deep breath. I'm going to go check, to make sure Sammy's body's okay. I'll go with you, Harris said. Me too, Dad, said Sarah Weaver insisted. I want to see Sammy one more time. Randy Weaver started to protest, but Vicky, who was nursing their youngest daughter, 10-month-old Elizabeth, Elisha Ba cut him off. Let her go, Randy. Her husband nodded. Sarah Weaver, who at 16 was Randy and Vicky's eldest child, followed her father and Kevin Harris out the cabin door. Cleared to fire came the FBI order when Randy, Kevin, and Sarah came out of the cabin and started hurrying towards the shed. One FBI sniper waited until Randy stopped at the door to the shed and then Then the federal man pulled the trigger. Randy Weaver was reaching up to unlatch the shed door when the sniper's bullet creased his right armpit and slammed into the shed. Randy's other hand flew to the site of the wound as the muzzle blast rang out over the mountainside. "Daddy! Get back in the house!" screamed Sarah Weaver as she grabbed her father and began pushing him back towards the cabin. Kevin Harris followed quickly after his two friends. Vicky Weaver, still nursing the 10-month-old she cradled in one arm, held the kitchen door open for Randy, Sarah, and Kevin. "You bastards!" Vicky screamed as the last of the three, Kevin Harris, ran past her into the kitchen. It was then that Agent Hiriuchi of the hostage rescue team pulled the trigger and fired the shot that would make him famous. The bullet struck Vicky Weaver squarely in the temple. Brain matter and large skull fragments were blasted out the opposite side of her head as the heavy .30 caliber slug exited her skull and continued on, tearing through Kevin Harris's left arm and smashing two of his ribs before finally lodging in his chest. Vicky Weaver's corpse collapsed on the floor, clutching the baby in a rictus of death. Sarah Weaver turned at the sound of the impact and took in the grisly scene. Her mother was obviously dead. Part of her head was gone. Kevin Harris's arms were torn open, and he had a bad-looking chest wound. He was doubled over, trying to get his breath, for his lung was collapsing. Her father, Sarah believed, was seriously wounded from Hiriuchi's first shot. Sarah Weaver looked for the baby and realized Elisheba was under her mother's lifeless body, still clutched in a dead woman's arms. Sarah grabbed her mother's corpse by the shoulder and pulled it over enough so that the baby would not be smothered, and then rushed to her wounded father. In a space of 36 hours, federal agents had killed Randy Weaver's wife and also his son. The FBI would claim that Hiriuchi had been authorized to shoot because when Randy, Sarah, and Kevin had come out of the cabin, they were about to open fire on a surveillance helicopter hovering overhead. One problem with this claim was that several government witnesses testified that when Hiriuchi fired the shot that creased Weaver's armpit, Randy Weaver was reaching to unlatch the shed door. He was not and could not have been shooting at a helicopter. The killing of Vicky Weaver was much harder to justify. The two men and the girl had been running into the relative safety of the cabin, and they had already gotten inside when Horiuchi fired his fatal second shot. No one could claim that the three were doing anything aggressive. They were simply running for their lives. Furthermore, Randy Weaver had been the first one in the door. No one could make a credible claim that the hostage rescue specialist had been shooting at him. The official report would be that Horiuchi had been trying to shoot Kevin Harris in the back as he ran into the kitchen, but had been late with the shot and then jerked the trigger. That was why the agent had shot the nursing mother in the head, purely by accident. It was also pure luck that Kevin Harris had been seriously wounded in the process. "What do you suppose they're doing up there?" one of the agents asked as he looked up the hill at the cabin. "Why don't they come out? The mother's dead. You'd think they'd give up." "I'm getting tired of standing here in this rain," his friend said. "Let's see if we can get a rise out of anyone up there." The agent cupped his hands to make a megaphone for his voice. "Vicky, oh Vicky, what are you going to cook us for breakfast tomorrow? Vicky, your husband loves it when you cook for him, doesn't he? Have you got enough for everybody, Vicky?" The agent shook his head and chuckled. "Guess it's not going to work. Try again later," his friend suggested. "I hate this job," Alex Newman thought as he stood in the cold night rain and watched the scene in front of him. He was standing by the barricaded Ruby Creek Bridge 4 miles below the Weaver cabin, where dozens of state and federal officers faced an angry mob of area residents and friends of the Weavers. Included in the group were Kevin Harris's parents. The situation was more volatile than anything that Newman had experienced in 18 years with the FBI. The feds had set up the barricade that morning to deny access to the Weaver property and had evicted over 30 nearby residents from their homes, some of them at gunpoint. The people absolutely hated the massive federal invasion. They were demanding answers, and they weren't getting any. Thank God they don't know about the dead boy, Newman thought. Yet. The veteran FBI man stood up straight in the cold rain and kept his face from showing any of what he felt inside. He had not yet heard about what had happened to Vicky Weaver 5 hours earlier. September 19th, 1992. Good afternoon. My name's Henry Bowman, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Henry, came a chorus of people replies simultaneously. I swear that's the most moronic part of this whole organization, Henry thought with an inward smile. But I guess I'd miss it if they didn't do it. Maybe. He cleared his throat and went on. There were about 20 people seated in front of him in the church rectory. It's been a while since I came to a meeting. A couple things have happened lately that made me realize it would be a good idea to find one and go. One of them was that I'm the sponsor for this young guy who just got out of a chemical dependency program at one of the hospitals, and he wanted to talk to me about something they'd gone over in the class. One of the counselors was talking about secrets about things in our past we're ashamed of. He was saying to the class that these things have a lot of power over us, mainly because they're a secret, not because of what they are. Anyway, this kid told me that some of the people in his class had volunteered to tell some secrets about themselves, and after they did, they seemed to feel a lot better for having done it. Only he couldn't bring himself to, in front of all those people. So he asked me, could he tell me his secret, which would be easier for him than fessing up in front of a whole bunch of people, some of them women. I guess I was kind of a practice run. Most of the people in the room laughed at that comment. I said sure and was hoping it'd be something interesting, because it had been a slow day, but he ended up telling me about how he'd stolen something worth about $10 from someone a long time ago, and he was really ashamed because the person was his best friend. We talked about it some, and he seemed to feel a lot better, and if I was disappointed because his secret was really boring, I tried not to let on. A few more people chuckled at that. After I hung up, I got to thinking about the whole secrets thing, and did I still have any? Came to realize there was one. I'd never thought of it in the way this kid had, because it wasn't something bad I'd done to somebody while I was drinking. It's something that happened to me 21 years ago when I was cold sober and my drinking consisted of maybe a glass of champagne at Christmas. Henry Bowman went on to tell the group about the summer night in 1971 when he had been gang raped while out running. He told the story quickly and without embellishment. He was surprised at how easy it was. Maybe the counselor at that program is onto something, Henry thought. When he finished the story, several people were looking at the floor. There was one woman, however, who could not take her eyes off Henry. That was 21 years ago. It was the real start of my drinking, and I was just lucky that someone took me to an AA meeting before I got into some disaster that couldn't be reversed. After I got sober, I started teaching personal self-defense classes using what I had learned. I told all of my students about what happened. Only thing is, I lied. I told them it was a severe beating, which it definitely was, but I left the sex part out of it. The classes were a success, and I have received letters over the years from former students saying that what they learned from me kept them alive and unhurt when they were attacked. Thing is, why did I lie? It wasn't because I'd done anything wrong. I hadn't committed a crime. You could argue that it wasn't my duty to air dirty linen in public, except I didn't tell anybody what really happened. Not for over 20 years. Not until right now. I haven't had a drink for 17 years. Some things are happening right now that make me feel powerless, very much like the way I felt that night in 1971, and I really wanted a drink last night. Henry paused and shook his head. I take that back. I didn't want one drink last night. I wanted a full bottle of gin and about a quart of fresh tonic water and a whole lime to slice up and a place to drink it with no phone and no television. But I knew if I did that, I'd have the same set of problems today, along with a great big new one, losing 20 years of sobriety. So I ate an ice cream cone instead and came here tonight. One by one, many of the people in the group thanked Henry for what he had said, and related something they had gotten out of hearing it. Several told secrets about themselves. Henry thought they were all pretty mundane, except for one member's confession that, after he had been fired from his job for drinking, he had a printer run off some labels for a wear-reducing engine additive, slapped one on a can of lapping compound, and sent it off with a "here's your free sample" letter on dummied-up Valvoline letterheaded to his ex-boss. The man's Mercedes had gone almost a whole week before the entire engine was ruined. "You sure your boss didn't keep a bottle of gin in his desk?" Henry asked when he heard the story. "I wouldn't dump some strange crap in my engine if the letter that came with it was from God himself." "I'd like to speak with you for a few minutes," the young woman said to Henry. "I haven't had dinner yet, and a coffee shop down the street has good milkshakes, if you like ice cream." Henry smiled. "Sure, I could go for that. I'm sorry if you said your name before. I didn't catch it." "No, it's only my fourth or fifth meeting here. We've never met, and I didn't say anything tonight. My name's Cindy Caswell." The two shook hands, and Cindy led the way out the door. "There's a secret I have that I wasn't quite ready to tell the whole group," Cindy said after they had been seated and had ordered their food. "I think you might understand, so I'd like to talk to you about it." Henry nodded his head, and Cindy Caswell told him about her abduction and subsequent 3-year ordeal in Las Vegas. When she got to the part about Fat Tony Ferrato, she told Henry that her last assignment had been an overweight man who had a heart attack during sex. She said she'd taken the considerable sum of money he'd had in his pocket, which was true, and managed to get out of town before anyone knew he was dead. Cindy Caswell was not about to confess to murder, not to someone from an AA meeting or to anyone else. She did, however, mention the date of the event, and Henry Bowman made a mental note of it. "So you went through all that for 3 years straight in Las Vegas, but didn't start drinking until you got back here?" Henry asked after the waitress brought his milkshake and Cindy's hamburger. He was reserving judgment on the story the girl had just told him. Alcoholics tended to lie when it suited their purpose, just like the rest of the population. "There, I didn't have a choice. I might as well have been kept in a cage. When I got back here, well," she let the sentence hang. "So why AA?" he asked critically as he sipped his milkshake. "You don't look too bad off to me, and it certainly didn't seem you were all too keen to be at the meeting tonight." "Judge's orders. I wrecked a car when I was drunk. Like an old junker, ran it off the road into the woods. No one hurt, but I totaled it, and when the police came and I was babbling, they did a test, and I came up more than double the limit. It was AA, or women's detention. And sometimes it seems to you that all this higher power stuff is a bunch of Jehovah's Witness crap, right? Let go and let God, serenity prayers and all that?" "Exactly." "Well," Henry said as he took a deep breath, "I got news for you. It is." "What?" she exclaimed, putting down her hamburger. "It is a bunch of crap, if you look at it that way." Simplistic phrases repeated endlessly by people who probably got shorted on the genetic lottery to begin with. Not apt to engender confidence in the program, if that's what you're focusing on. But there are a lot of good people in AA that just about anyone would look up to. Go talk to them. Find out what they got out of the program. Don't ask the sappy-sounding moron that says he's got his recovery all figured out when he's only been sober 3 weeks. And if you think you aren't an alcoholic, well, driving off into a tree doesn't strike me as normal behavior. You've got enough problems, like getting snatched off the street, without making more trouble for yourself." Cindy nodded. "So, what works for you?" she asked. "Law of physics. That's my higher power. Energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. Immutable. Constant. Stand in the way of a freight train, you get clobbered. All the good intentions, or willpower, or careful planning won't change the train's effect on your body. Same thing with alcohol. My body has a biochemical addiction to a drug, period. If I have one drink, I want another one a lot more than I wanted the first one. All the good intentions and careful planning can't change that. Other people may not have the biochemical addiction, but I do, just like my cousin is allergic to penicillin. One injection and his heart stops beating. Mine chugs along with no problem. I can't change those things. Going to AA reminds me of that. Keeps me from thinking maybe that freight train won't hurt me if I'm real careful. It's also a chance for me to see how good life is when you stay sober. Those people in there tonight, a lot of them had one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel when they first came in, Henry chuckled. People been sober a month can't wait to tell everyone about all the terrible things they did when they were drunk. People been sober a long time like to talk about all the great things that have happened since they stopped wandering around in a gin fog. I'd like you to be my sponsor, Cindy Caswell said suddenly. No, Henry Bowman said immediately, shaking his head. Bad idea. Opposite-sex sponsors are strongly discouraged, and with good reason. Sexual tension is real bad news, tossed on top of recovery. More than a few of the young babes new to AA get 13th step by guys in the group. Some guys even go to AA meetings for that reason. They don't put it in the literature, Henry added, and being a girl's sponsor makes it that much easier. So no. As he was saying this, Cindy Caswell was shaking her head vigorously in disagreement. After those 3 years in Las Vegas, I don't have any desire for men. I much prefer women, so that wouldn't be a problem if you were my sponsor. Hell, that doesn't matter, Henry exclaimed. We're not talking about your sex drive. Jesus, it wasn't your urges that caused you 3 years of grief. He gave a short laugh. A few months after my little incident in Jefferson County, my interest in the female gender came back with a goddamn vengeance, and it's been that way ever since. Cindy Caswell laughed heartily when she heard this. That's good, she said with a smile. Yeah, no shit. Look, I don't really know anyone around here, Cindy said, changing her tact. And things are kind of up in the air for me right now. Can I still call you and talk about stuff like we did tonight? Call you on the phone? Yeah, sure, that's okay. Henry pulled a business card out of his pocket, listing the consulting firm where he worked, and wrote his home number on the back. Don't worry about the time. I live alone and I keep weird hours. I've got a roommate, but so do I. What about your family and Rolla? Henry asked suddenly. Have you seen them? Cindy Caswell looked distinctly uncomfortable at the question. I called there from a payphone, but the number has been disconnected. I guess they're gone. Why don't you just run down there? It's only a couple hours from here. You'd be sure to find someone, you know. It's only been 4 years, right? I don't want to be seen. Sal knew I was from there. I'm not sure they're still alive now. He may have had them killed, you know, because I ran away. That doesn't make any sense, Henry thought immediately. Go 2,000 miles to track down and kill the family of one of their captive whores because she took off after 3 years? Whole story's probably made up. White trash parents threw her out or something. Henry nodded as if agreeing with her. This Sal guy, Henry said, as if trying to remember. He wasn't the one who died, was he? Henry was hoping some more names would shake loose. No, that was Fat Tony. Sal Marino was the guy who told me who I had to screw. Fat Tony and Sal Marino, Henry thought. Sounds like a high school production of Guys and Dolls, Henry. Henry nodded and then changed the subject back to the AA meeting. He kept the two names filed in his memory.